All right, I see the live button. Oh, there we go. Fantastic. Okay. Well, I believe that we're live. Marie, how you doing?
I'm good, Casey. How are you?
Fantastic. How is life in the snowy northern wilderness?
Oh,
there
the
over there?
igloo's almost melted, so we're good.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
So for
yeah.
we're gonna have a lot of fun today. We're gonna
This is
spend about
good.
an hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. I don't know. Talking about the awesomeness that is a Google Quality Rater updates. We're also going to talk about questions that I have, mostly just about Canada. First of all, again, is it true that Kraft macaroni and cheese is like basically a food group up there? I'd
You
heard
know,
that and it was crazy.
this was news to me that KD is Canadian. I mean, seriously.
Yeah,
But I mean,
KD, which is what Kraft dinner. So
yeah,
Kraft dinner
yeah.
is like unbelievable. When someone said that Kraft macaroni and cheese was like a huge thing, I didn't believe them. I had been in Canada like 4 years ago, and they took me to a butcher shop, and I saw that they actually made sausage, Kraft macaroni and cheese sausage, and it blew my mind.
Well, the very first thing I ever made when I went to
Mm-hmm.
university was my mom cut out a piece of a magazine, and it was all these different KD Kraft dinner recipes. So I used to make Kraft dinner with, this sounds awful, but tuna and pickles. And it was so good. But I haven't eaten KD in years, so yeah, it's good for a treat every now and then.
Fantastic. So everyone, looks like everyone's coming on in. Welcome to the webinar today. Really excited to have you today. We're going to be visiting with Marie Haynes, well-known SEO consultant and expert on the Google Quality Rater guidelines and the concept of E.A.T. If you haven't had a chance to look at the description for the webinar, basically what we're going to be talking about today is a deep dive into the understanding of the concepts behind the Quality Rater guidelines, the concepts of E.A.T, the concepts of creator expertise, and we're going to speak a little bit, if not maybe more than we'd like actually, about the recent March 12th core update. I know that impacted a lot of people negatively, impacted some people positively. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about various topics like, again, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, how bloggers can build that up, what Google is looking for, and the like. And we're also going to talk about really important things like the strategic maple syrup reserve that's based in Quebec. Totally blew my mind. Didn't even know that was a thing. Marie didn't know that it was a thing, but apparently a barrel of maple syrup is worth 10 times what a barrel of oil is. So
Maple syrup is
there you go.
hard to produce. Seriously, it makes
There's a
sense.
cartel. There is a maple syrup cartel. Now you know, and that's probably going to be your only takeaway today from this webinar. So
There you
no,
go.
we're not kidding. So what we're going to do is we're going to get right into it. There's a lot of questions. We're going to get to those questions as we go in, but what we're going to do is lay a foundation first. And Marie, explain it like I'm 5. That's one of the most popular Reddit communities on Reddit. My wife has to explain things to me like I'm 5 all the times. I have flashcards. It works great. We are going to talk a little bit about that today. Let's just talk a little bit about the Quality Rater guidelines.
Sure.
So explain it like we're 5. What are the Quality Rater guidelines?
So the guidelines, first thing to know is that they're publicly available to everybody. So if you do a search right now for Google search quality guidelines or quality rater guidelines, you'll find this document. It's a PDF, and it's about 166 pages, I think. And it can be a little bit of slow reading, but there's so much really good information in there. So let's talk about first why they were created. The guidelines were created for these people that are called Google's quality raters. And these quality raters are not the same people as most of you have heard of the web spam team, where, if Google can put a penalty on your site, it's because one of the web spam team has taken a look at your site and found that you're not following Google's guidelines. The quality raters are not those people. So any one of us could apply to be a quality rater. I actually applied, got approved. You have to commit to work. I think it's 15 hours a week, and they don't pay very much. I think they pay about $15 an hour to be a quality rater. But if you get approved, then you can work on all these different projects, and not all of them will be Google, but a lot of them are. And so Google's quality raters, I've heard some people say there are 10,000 of them in the world. I've heard another person say there's up to 100,000 of these people. So the guidelines are basically teaching them how to assess whether a website or a result is high quality or not. And there's a spokesperson for Google, the vice president of search, his name is Ben Gomes. He recently said in an interview with CNBC that the quality raters guidelines don't tell us exactly, it's not like, oh, it's in the guidelines, so the algorithms must be doing this exactly. But they fundamentally show us where Google wants to go with their algorithms. So our plan of action is to say, if something's in the quality raters guidelines, Google wants to be able to programmatically measure this type of thing. And so this is really like a handbook for what's considered quality in Google's eyes.
Now, there's been a lot of consternation over the years where, and again, I get this question all the time from bloggers, are the quality rater guidelines used in rankings? And again, you've kind of touched on that, but recently there's been some changes with regards to that. Google's actually come out and said specifically that maybe they are used in ranking, specifically with regards to the concept of PageRank being used as a identifier with certain your money or your life concepts. Explain a little bit about what these your money, your life concepts are and what that statement was recently.
So the term your money or your life, they abbreviate it to YMYL. And there's a bit of debate as to what exactly is a YMYL site. If your site is medical, financial, legal, those are definitely your money or your life. It's a site where, if you're looking for tax information, you don't want to go to a site that, you've never heard of. You want to get that information from somebody that you trust that has good expertise in that area. What's debatable, though, is other areas of YMYL. So I know that in this webinar, we have a lot of food bloggers, and you would say, is food blogging YMYL? And in some cases, I think it is. And in some cases, maybe not. So if you're helping people make decisions where they have to spend money, then you're probably YMYL. And the question
that comes down to health-related claims as well. So if we've got bloggers who are gluten-free, if we've got bloggers who are celiac recoverers, they're in many cases, these gluten-free bloggers, most of them are self-healed. They've had celiac disease. How does that relate to the content or the information they might be putting out on their site?
That's an excellent question. And so I think to answer that, we sort of need to define what E.A.T is. So E.A.T is this concept that's throughout the quality raters guidelines. And Google just released a white paper a few weeks ago that actually talks about the fact that E.A.T is used in their ranking systems. They try to understand whether a site has E.A.T. So it stands for expertise, authoritativeness, and trust. So let's go back to the idea of somebody who's blogging about celiac disease. It depends on what you're writing about. If you are trying to write an article to explain what celiac disease is, how it's treated, how doctors look at this disease, you may have trouble ranking for that content unless you're truly known in the industry as, like in the medical circles, as an expert on celiac disease. That said, if you were trying, you could get known. I mean, you may not, in that case, it's not like you're going to go to school and become a physician and, get a nutrition degree. Maybe you already have that. And if you do, you need to show that. But in other cases, you can have expertise, not necessarily in how the disease is treated, but expertise in the diet for celiac disease. And so a lot of E.A.T, expertise is one thing. So let's say you've had a nutrition practice where you've been counseling people for 10 years on celiac disease. That's one thing. That's the E in E.A.T. But the A is very important. So that's authoritativeness. If you are known online, if people look up your name and celiac disease and they can see, oh yeah, this person's been quoted in this, authoritative nutrition magazine and all of these authoritative places, that speaks to your E.A.T for that particular condition. So one of the issues that I really think Google is trying to fix here is when content is ranking, but you're lacking the E.A.T to write that content. If that makes sense.
Got it. Very, very true. And again, this could apply also to those bloggers on the call that are in the paleo or the keto niches, especially considering that's a very hot diet right now. If you are providing any sort of, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, Maria, but if you're providing any sort of health or medical related information, it's not enough to use your own experience. Though, again, the quality rater guidelines say specifically for bloggers that if you are a, for example, an experienced home cook with clear demonstrated expertise, that can be classified as a highest meets needs example. But in most cases, if you're making claims of any sort of a health or related concept, we clearly want the bloggers to link out to supporting information when at all possible. Is that
And
what Google's
that's very
basically
important.
saying?
Yes, the
Mhm.
guidelines talk about the importance of backing up. Any claim that can be backed up by science should be. So if you are talking, let's say you have an article talking about how the keto diet will change your metabolism, and so there have to be scientific references that support your theory. It can't just be a theory. Now, let's say that you have loads of real life experience. You can still write about that. You can say, like, so what I would do there is actually write an article showing case studies of here's what we've seen happen. And
Mhm.
then as people start referencing your work, then you can start building up some authority. But one of the real common problems that I see is that, especially with food bloggers and people talking about diet and nutrition, is they're trying to go too far into medical explanations, where really you should only be doing this if you have the medical expertise to write about this.
Right. Well, let's talk about things, on-site things that users can do to build up this E.A.T, this expertise, authoritativeness, trustworthiness. We had a good question here from Carol. I'd like to know if we should put our name on each post as author, even if it's a one-person blog. Now, again, I'm a big believer that everything we publish on the internet should be signed. For those of you on the call who are recipe bloggers and using a recipe plugin, that's built in, the ability for you to show that you are the publisher of that. And in many cases, especially if you're using something like WP Tasty, WP Recipe Maker, you can actually put a custom author link. Now, Marie, I advise people to usually try to link that signature to their About Me page or even a
Yeah.
custom author page. Is that something you would recommend as well
Yeah.
as a kind of way to reinforce that E.A.T on site?
Yeah. So I'm going to try not to get too technical here, but
Mm-hmm.
the answer to this lies in understanding entities.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess the simple way to explain it is pretty much everything is an entity. So you as
Mm-hmm.
an author, you're an entity. Casey, you're an entity, right? And let's take your example. You're good at SEO.
Well,
For example, I
debatable.
don't know. I mean, some people say you
Debatable.
are. Who knows? And so SEO is an entity, and
Mm-hmm.
Casey is an entity. And Google needs to be able to connect that other people who are considered authoritative in SEO recognize Casey as good at SEO. And so Google can connect things from all over the web to say, this person is known as an expert in this sort of subject area, right? And so one of the problems is that a lot of sites want to remain anonymous, and I mean, on my own site, I don't have my phone number on there for certain reasons, but you can still find ways to contact me. You know who's writing the content on my site. So if you were trying to become known as an authority in a particular area, then if Google doesn't know your actual name, that's going to be really hard for them to connect that you're the authority. Now, it can be done. Let's say you're trying to use a brand name.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And many bloggers might feel that, instead of saying, maybe instead of saying their name, they say the Mediterranean dish, or they use the
yeah,
name of their blog.
exactly.
Now, when we go into their blogs, especially considering most of these bloggers are on WordPress, fortunately, they're using the Yoast SEO plugin, which has the ability to go in and set up custom identifiers under knowledge graph.
Mhm,
So, I mean, that way we can tie the
mhm.
brand name to the author name pretty easily. So,
And that's
and I
perfect,
think
Casey. Yeah,
and I think a lot of people understand that we can dumb this down quite a bit. If you're doing that on the call, if you're using Yoast and you're going in and under general, you're filling in that knowledge graph information, you're making that entity relationship
mhm.
already. Now, you might not generate a really kick-ass knowledge panel on the right-hand side of Google like the Pioneer Woman or someone who has really big established authority, but it's certainly a start. Would
Mhm.
that be correct?
Yeah, and so one of the things that's in the quality raters guidelines is they actually instruct the quality raters on some of
Mm-hmm.
their tasks to see if they can determine who's responsible for the content on the site.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say there's a site that has all of these articles about nutrition, and they're all attributed to, a lot of WordPress themes do this. They'll attribute them to admin, right? Not an actual author. So then if somebody's looking at that website, forget the quality raters, just think of like an actual searcher looking at it. They're not going to
Mm-hmm.
know who admin is, right? I mean, if they do some digging, they can figure out, oh yeah, this is from this brand that is known for having gluten-free recipes or something like that. But you really want to say, I think it's better to actually, in most cases, have a particular author build up their EAT. So we can have EAT for the business or for the brand, but also EAT for the author. So what I like to see is every post has an author bio. And the author bio just gives 3 to 4 lines to explain to a user why this person's qualified to write this. So I'll say, she's been creating gluten-free recipes for the last 10 years, and she's been mentioned in Forbes and blah, 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 all these other places. And then we give a link to their full author bio. Okay. And the author bio should have everything that you can that says, here's why this person is incredible and why you want to read this content from him or her. And so that's what I like to see. So number 1, it needs to be clearly identified who's responsible for the content. Number 2, have an author bio. And then number 3, have a full author page that fully extols their EAT. Now, I should say this is based on me sort of piecing together things that are in the Quality Raters guidelines, a bit of common sense as well. But a lot of what I'm saying is not, I can't say 100% if this is how Google is measuring it. We can just say this is how the Quality Raters are told to evaluate that type of thing.
So just to kind of clarify, because this is a very popular question, if someone is typing is for example, blogging under the name, for example, the Mediterranean dish, but they really want to make sure, maybe their name is Susie K. I'm using Susie K, who's on the call today as an example. She is signing most of her posts with the Mediterranean dish, but I believe that we're linking that to her About Me page, which also tells about her specifically. That should be enough from the entity classification point for Google to make that. Is that correct?
Okay, so we're getting into some theory here. So I'll tell you what I think about this, and we may disagree on this. I think that that's okay, provided that the Mediterranean dish has really good brand recognition. Okay, so if for example, if Google puts out a blog post, let's say John Mueller puts out a blog post, I recognize John Mueller. But let's say the blog post is just signed, a Google employee.
Got it.
We know Google's got authority, right? There is some authority there. But if that comes from John Mueller, there's a certain level. He's got, he's known as understanding web spam. He's known for certain things. So I think it can be even stronger signals of authority to build up your author EAT as well. Okay, so in that particular situation, I would like to see both, so I think you need to decide whether you're trying to build up the authority of the brand alone, or whether you're building up your personal authority. And I sort of feel like the personal authority is the way to go, because when people are quoting food bloggers, again, for example, so let's say you get a mention in an authoritative news article, they want to mention people. They rarely want to say, well, according to this brand, this is what happened. They want people to emerge as the experts. And so that's, I like to see more emphasis on individual authority.
There you go. And I think that makes sense, especially, again, I've been pushing, especially with these food blogging, do-it-yourself and lifestyle bloggers, these audits, building up their creator expertise. We're, popping logos on their footer. We're popping logos on their sidebar. We're tricking out their About Me pages. And, I have a lot of bloggers who struggle with, should I be tied to my name? Should I be tied to my brand? And I believe, I think probably, as you're saying, is I agree as well that maybe we can tie it to their name and be a little bit more effective, especially considering a lot of them have the ability or the opportunity to be interviewed, to generate brand mentions, to do guest blogging. I prefer that all be tied to their name, their author name, as opposed to their brand whenever possible. Now, for those of you on the call using a plugin, you can go in and make one field change and it will change your author on all of your basic recipe cards. So that's a positive. So for example, if you're on WP Recipe Maker or WTasty, you can go in and probably make a change right there to your profile, switch everything over to your name, and make sure that custom URL links to your About Me page, and we'll call it a day.
I think it's important here to also talk about how Google measures EAT, which again, there's some theory here, but it's based on a number of things that different Google employees and documents have said. So at PubCon conference in Austin last year, I asked Gary Ish, who's a Google spokesperson, how does Google algorithmically measure EAT? And I didn't expect that I'd get an answer from him, but he did. He said, it's largely based on off-site links and mentions. So let's unpack that. If it's one thing to put it on my website, and I still do recommend it. We've had clients where we've seen them make improvements, and the only change that we've made has been more clear on our website about what our expertise is, what awards we've won, why, where we've been recognized, and things like that. That's important. But by far, what's most important is that other people are recognizing your authority as well. So, again, in the example of SEO, if I write something about a recent algorithm update and Search Engine Land says, oh, Marie Haynes said this, that's something that probably is picked up in Google's algorithms, because Google is saying, oh, Search Engine Land is recognized as an authority in SEO, and they're quoting this other person who they're saying is an expert, so she must be an authority in SEO. So really what you want to be doing to improve your author E.A.T is to find ways to get other people to talk about you, which is very challenging. And it also goes against a lot of our natures, right? Like, if you're humble and you don't want to brag about your qualifications, you kind of have to start doing some of that in order for Google to recognize that you truly are the authority.
Right, and that again, that's extremely important. And I've had a couple questions here about someone who I believe personally is doing this extremely well. And I don't like to call people out specifically, but again, Danielle with wenthere8this.com, she had it on it with me in January, and she was like, just tell me what to do. I'm going to do it. And she just boom, 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 boom. And she's had a noticeable increase in traffic since January by putting this E.A.T on her website, by going ahead and tricking out her sidebar and her About Me page with clear demonstrated expertise. She had fantastic links from big publications. And if you go and take a look at her site, folks, again, went there, ate this, she has linked all of her recipe cards to her About Me page tied to her name. Everything is very clear there. She's done a fantastic job in her sidebar optimization. That's what I push in the audits. Some bloggers are quick to embrace it. Others, it takes a little while. But if I was going to say, hey, this is what we need to show generated E.A.T or creator expertise, she's got it dialed in. So take a look at that example.
And that's really good. I think a lot of people get confused about, for E.A.T, they look at just the E. They say, hey, I've been doing this for 20 years. Why is this person who's new outranking me? And I think the answer to that is to look at the A, the authoritativeness. And that's really tricky, right? Because if you're a no-name blogger and nobody's ever heard about you, why would people be mentioning you and linking to you? And if you think about it, why do links matter, right? Links matter because if I link to you, Casey, it's because I'm recommending you. I'm recommending your content. And so if you can't do stuff to make people start talking about you, it might be hard to rank. And so one of the keys is to just keep experimenting with what can you produce that actually gets people talking about it, and what can you do in a way that's different than the hundreds of other sites that have the same recipe or the same issue that you're trying to cover. How can you be unique? And that's tricky, right? That's you can't just keep producing content en masse, hoping that every now and then one of those will hit the jackpot and start going viral. You have to be consistently producing stuff where people say, oh, I want to go to this website to get my information.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit. I think we've dialed in the fundamentals. We've identified the definitions for what is a E.A.T. Did we cover the definition for basically what is a core update? Let's go ahead and talk a little bit.
So let's talk about that. All right, so I want to go back and take you back to February of 2017. This is when, so I've been doing site quality reviews and helping people who have seen drops in conjunction with Google updates since 2012. And February 7th, 2017 was one of the biggest updates we've ever had. And we didn't put a name on it at all. But I saw all these sites come to me, and it was very clear that they were being outranked by sites that had, and I didn't know what the word was at that time, but now I can see it's more E.A.T. We could see, the site that's ranking #1 for your query now, they've got degrees in this topic. They've been doing it forever. They're recognized. They're quoted all over Google News, things like that. And so I firmly believe that February of 2017 is when Google started putting E.A.T related information into their algorithmic calculations. So recently, so we know that we've had an update March 12th of 2019. And the other past big updates were September 27th was
Mhm.
again an unnamed update, and then August 1st of last year, which a lot of people called Medic, but it was
Right,
way
right.
more than just medical sites. It was connected to E.A.T and your money or your life sites. A
Mhm.
lot of these sites saw changes. When August 1st first came out, Danny Sullivan from Google said, look, a lot of people are asking, how do I recover if I've been hit? And he said, there's no specific advice for recovery, but we've got a whole document, 160 pages, and he linked to the Quality Raters guidelines.
Right, right.
And that backed up my theory that I think almost every update that we've had since early 2017 has been connected to different things that are in these guidelines. And there's some things I think that are in the guidelines that they're still working on trying to algorithmically measure. But I think almost every update we can see, like August 1st, I think was primarily about authority. September 27th was primarily about the T in E.A.T was trust. We can go further into that if you want to.
Mhm.
But so when there's an update, what's happening here is Google's engineers, they say, oh, here's a problem. Here's these medical sites are ranking and they're giving inaccurate information, something like that. And then they brainstorm on ways to fix it. And they come up with a new algorithm that makes it so that some of these sites don't rank so well. Then they put that in front of the quality raters, and they have thousands of quality raters look at the new search results and say, like, hey, would you trust this site? Would you trust the medical information from this site? And the quality raters give them feedback to say, yeah, that, you know, the SERPs are better now, or I'm not seeing these low quality sites for whatever reason. And then they know, the engineers know, okay, we can push that change live and we get a big algorithm update. And then we also have little tweaks to the algorithm updates. So, you know, there's rumors that potentially there's a tweak to the March 12th update that's happening right now. And that's pretty common. After a big update, Google will sort of play with the levers a little bit and make some things that they thought were super important, maybe not as important, and vice versa. So hopefully that explains how the updates tend to happen these days.
So for those on the call who were affected, and there have been several people, let's talk a little bit about what they can do specifically to approach this. Now, clearly the first thing is probably a content and reputation audit. We need to really go into the site very closely, see, you know, clearly, you know, we could talk about technical issues as well. I mean, you're like me, we basically try to correct everything. We don't correct one or two things. We do an audit, we surface 300 issues, and I try to tell everyone to correct them all.
Yep.
But there are various things that we should probably specifically look at with regards to this recent poor update. Now, it's not really, I know a lot of people thought it might have been a rollback. We know that's not the case, correct? This is more of an adjustment. Glenn Gabe has done an excellent, so a lot of research on that. We might link to that article in a minute. But tell me a little bit how you would approach someone who's had a traffic drop with regards to this recent March 12th update.
So the first thing to know is if you dropped just a couple of positions for some of your keywords, you probably weren't negatively affected by this update. It's more that some of your competitors have been working on improving quality. So when sites are negatively affected by a quality update like this, it tends to have a drastic effect, a very dramatic effect. And so what we see in our experience is, you know, traffic's traveling along and then March 12th or whatever hits, and then you see like a 40 to 200%. Well, I guess you can't have a 200% drop, but you see a very, very big drop. And so if you're just seeing a very slight drop in traffic, it might be that you're not doing anything wrong, that competitors are just outranking you now. But if you did see a significant drop, then there's a few things to look at. So like Casey said, the first thing we always do is look at technical issues. I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody say, I'll give you an example. There was a Panda update in, I don't know, 2014 or something. And a client came to me saying like, look, our traffic is down. It's gone to almost nothing. And it turns out that they had just launched a redesign and forgot to implement their Google Analytics on the new site. And so this had nothing to do with the update. They just weren't tracking they actually got more traffic after their update. And so first thing you want to do is look at like, are there technical issues? Is it affecting your entire site? You know, maybe it's just one page. Maybe you were getting 90% of your traffic from one page and you've lost one or two positions in ranking.
That's going to knock it down. Yeah.
Exactly, right? That can make a big difference.
Yeah.
So if you've kind of determined that technical things are not the issue, then start looking at Google's Quality Raters guidelines. And The first area I would look at is trust. So I have a post. I don't know if you want to link to it, Casey. It's if you go to mariehaynes.com/trust, it'll take you to my article on the September 27th update. And I list, I think there's about 10 different things that are in the Quality Raters guidelines that could contribute to a lower assessment of trust. And it's probably too much to get into in this whole call, but some of the very easy or obvious things are if you have a very bad reputation online. We saw examples of sites that dropped because people everywhere were complaining that they couldn't get a refund, or that they just had very bad customer service with this business. And that's something that can actually affect your ability to rank. And that's the T in E.A.T, that people generally don't trust your business. And then I would be looking at how authoritative are your authors compared to the sites that are now outranking you. And this can be really tricky. Casey, do you want me to go into how I do that check for?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that. So I'm going to use you as an example again, Casey.
Should be a very quick example.
A very quick example. Let's say that your rankings dropped for a bunch of SEO related stuff.
Yeah.
And so I'll start doing some searches for your name. And so I'll do a search for Casey Marquis SEO. And I want to see what appears. Oh, and minus your own site. Okay?
Minus my own site.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll do a minus site : your site. Okay. And what that search does is it tells me I want to see people who are talking about Casey and SEO, but not on Casey's own site. And this is how the quality raters are instructed in the guidelines to do these searches. So do a search, those of you who are watching this, do a search for your own name. And, if you have a name that's a common name, then add your keyword. So whatever your main thing that you want to be known for. And I want to see the first page of results. Who's talking about you? So the example that's in the quality raters guidelines, they give these examples of like somebody who wrote an article on how to treat the flu. Right. And they say, this person doesn't have any medical expertise. And if you Google their name, all you can see is she's a content writer, she has a Twitter profile, but there's nothing to say like, oh yeah, this person is the go-to person on the flu.
Right. And just to interject here, so what I've done is I've pasted over an example search using the query that Marie has given, and it shows Casey Marquis minus MediaWise.com SEO. Okay. And you can see on that first list of pages where I have been referenced Semrush, Search Engine News, Dishing with Delicious Interviews, Spartan Media, Medium.com, other publications which reinforce, hopefully, my expertise and authoritativeness and hopefully trustworthiness with regards to the topic of SEO. Exactly. You can take that and just use it for your own name, see what comes up, and see if we can pull some of the citations that way.
That's it. Yes. And then I would do the same search on Google News as well. Although depending on the niche, some niches aren't in the news.
And in Google Scholar, is that correct?
Scholar is another place to go as well. Although I think most people watching this probably don't have a lot of Google Scholar mentions, but it's.
I'm only mentioned in some, Association of Pork studies where I talk about bacon and pork bellies. That's it. Nothing else.
Cutting edge bacon research is where you're mentioned.
Cutting edge
bacon. We joke about that, Casey, though. But you're like, if I mention to people who know you, what is Casey Marquis known?
What's Casey Marquis known for? It's not for SEO. It's for that.
Yeah, like if you wanted to start a blog on bacon, you have some authority there, right?
I have some earned expertise. Remember Clout?
Yes.
Remember Clout? Oh, yes, I was like the top bacon expert for a while. That was hilarious.
Which it sounds silly.
Makes no sense. It's very silly, but it's just that I like bacon. I'm a big fan of pork, and I think it's just meat candy. And that's one of the things that people have associated with me over the years. So clearly that is funny, but it's true.
And, just one final thing on this then. So if you do the same search then for, if people are trying this at home, do the same search for the sites that are currently ranking and for their authors. And the example that's given in the Quality Raters guidelines is a woman named Lisa Belkin, and she's written some article on using strollers. And if you search for Lisa Belkin and parenting, you'll see she's mentioned in the New York Times. She's been on PBS for something. She's written a book. And so this is what comes up on the first page. So if you Google your name plus your keyword and nobody's talking about you, that's what you need to work on. That's a big thing.
Yeah, I always saw Andrea made a very good point here about how she wishes Cloud had gone somewhere because she wrote the Dummy's Guide to it.
That's awesome. I liked Clout. I know Matt Cutts used to use the Clout. I don't know if it was a Chrome extension to like sort of determine who was important to respond to.
I got like 3 perks. I think I got a
Uh,
bacon sampler kit and some free socks, and then maybe movie tickets around once. But it just,
yeah, it
yeah,
could have been something else, but yeah,
kind of bummed
we've,
out.
we've been playing around with using Google's Knowledge Graph API and even the natural language processing to sort of see if we can figure out, how are they algorithmically determining whether you're an expert in your area or not. So give me a few more months and we'll probably have some more information on that. But the whole point is Google's trying to figure out, like, do other people recognize you as an expert on your topics?
Right. And let's talk a little bit about that, because in many cases, especially if you're a food do-it-yourself or lifestyle blogger, in many cases, you're a home cook. You're a home
Mhm.
do-it-yourself blogger. You're a
Mhm.
home lifestyle blogger. These bloggers always ask me, well, Casey, I don't have any demonstrated expertise. I don't have any certifications. Well,
Mhm.
in many cases, it's just that they haven't looked really closely. So the question is really what would, Stephanie has a great question here. What would a self-taught cook do
Mhm.
to improve their demonstrated E.A.T? And I assume that, again, we're doing these searches. We're going into Google Search Console. We're looking at sites linking to me. We're
Mhm.
finding, you'd be surprised at when I do this for audits, how many people have a link from Savor or the New York Times, or they've had numerous mentions from BuzzFeed or Country Living or
Mhm.
even Men's or Women's Health.
Yep.
That, again, are the kind of citations we're talking about, correct? We want to
Yes.
go ahead and pull those out. We want
Yes.
to go ahead and reference those visually on the site, and we want to go ahead and put those on the About Me page
Mhm.
as well. For, again, so those of you on the call, look at that example on Danielle's site. Went there, that she had a ton of expertise she had no idea existed.
Yep.
And we pulled all of that out. We linked to it. Another good example is aaronskitchen.com. Also, Kelly Sensei with justataste.com. She is a extremely well-known blogger. She has, of course, a little bit more formal expertise. She's culinary education, culinary school. She worked with the Food Network. She's published a book on food blogging.
Mhm.
That's the kind of stuff that most people aren't going to have, but the shows
Yep.
that demonstrated the EAT, and that's why, again, she does really well, as do others.
So to answer that, I'm going to talk a little bit about my own story. So
Mm-hmm.
some of you watching this might know that I used to be a veterinarian, and I got into SEO in 2008 as a hobby, and then 2012 full time. And that's a whole story for another day. But how did I mean, now today I feel like I have some authority. I'm recognized as an authority in certain things in SEO, but that wasn't the case back, 10 years ago. So my first, I wrote. Do you remember when Moz had the UMoz thing?
Oh,
Where
yeah,
you
I
could,
remember. I
yeah,
remember
yeah,
seeing
right.
it.
And you could submit posts to. Now, I'm not telling everybody go guest posting for. I know we had some questions on guest posting. But guest posting is a good place to start, not to get links, but to start getting your name known. So I wrote a couple of things for you, Moz, and I started getting people emailing me saying, "Hey, I saw your article on Moz, and it really helped me." And so that gave me a bit of authority. And then Moz was like, "Hey, your articles are really good. We'd like you to write for our main blog," and that really helped my business as well. Now, I'm not saying go guest posting so you can get links, but guest post in places where you think it'll get you business and it'll get you customers and people
Mm-hmm.
actually referring to, because we used to, back in the day, and I think a lot of SEO agencies are still doing this, where they're
Right.
putting such an emphasis on get as many links as you can. But really our goal in link building should be to do things that would matter even if SEO didn't matter.
Right.
And so,
And that's what
yeah.
Google says, is that, well, not just Google, but most of us who know what we're doing, we basically say, construct your site as a way that if Google didn't exist, you'd be successful.
Yes,
And so we look at
exactly.
that for other channels. Now, on that note, building up your brand mentions, building up your brand authority, what are some ways that bloggers can do that? I know that we've mentioned a lot of them know about Hero, help a reporter out.
Yep.
Okay.
Hero is fantastic. There can be some
Problem
low quality stuff.
The
Yeah.
problem with that is that there's 800,000 people
Mhm.
using that service. So if you're on the call and you've never heard of Hero, which I believe is now owned by Cision,
Mhm.
but there are 800,000 people on that platform. So if you sign up for the news alerts, and basically how Hero works is that they'll send you a digest of reporters or journalists or bloggers looking for quotes article ideas or just help putting together an article, and they send that 3 times a day.
Mhm.
You have to really get on that immediately. The people that apply right away are the ones that
Yes.
tend to get consideration. Now, that being said, I know that there's some other ones out there, and I'm going to go ahead and paste over a couple of them. Many of you might not be aware of other kind of competitors to Haro or Help a Reporter Out that are smaller and not as, again, they're not as, for example, packed. One of them is called Source Bottle. So take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and paste that over here. You also want to take a look at My Blog You by Ann Smarty. I know you're aware of that one, Marie.
Mhm.
My Blog You. We're going to paste that one over as well.
And then
another one.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Did you
Put
have
one in there too. On Twitter, you can use the hashtag journo request, and you can, put in some of your keywords for that. So then you can find people who are looking for a food blogger or a particular type of journalist.
journo request? Okay.
Source particular. The other thing, though, that kind of predates this should be not just, I see all these people doing outreach, and I did the opposite. I went on Haro and signed up to be a publisher, and I wrote an article and actually solicited responses. It was about it was about the Penguin algorithm.
Right.
I'll tell you, people get so many responses that unless your response is fantastic, you're not going to get picked as a source. And so this is where it's hard for somebody with no expertise. So what I would recommend is start developing some relationships with these people that you want to eventually get mentions from. Follow them on Twitter, start responding to some of their things. I can't tell you how many times I get emails saying like, hey, I published this great post. Can you link to it? And I've never heard of the person. Whereas, Casey, if you sent me something and asked me to link to it, if Glenn Gabe, Glenn doesn't even have to ask me to link to his stuff because I recognize his name. But if he reached out to me and asked for me to mention him, sure, we've got I know him, I respect him in the industry, and I would link to him.
Right.
So a lot of it is relationship, is building up a relationship with the people that you want to be mentioned by.
Exactly. And again, I'm very fortunate. Like I said, I tend to send gift baskets to people.
Yep.
That's the only way that I get quoted anymore.
It all comes back to bacon.
It all comes back to bacon. If someone wants,
Seriously.
bacon, but it is funny though, because that has been a cutting kind of notation. I have been, as you can imagine, what do I get around the holidays? Lots and lots of bacon. There's only so much bacon I can eat, which is great. I live close to a outreach center, so I can donate anything that's an overflow. But yeah, it's
that brings up
fantastic.
another point, though, too, is seeing if you can find something in your particular vertical that you can become the expert on. So I'm sure there are other people in the world who are experts on bacon, but still you've managed to brand yourself as that, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's great, but I mean, it's worked out really well. I mean, people are like, oh, hey, you're the bacon guy, or hey, you work with all the food bloggers. And I'm like, yeah, I tell you, it's been great for me. I get a lot of food related gifts around the holidays. Can't argue with it. My waistline is not too happy about it, but I mean, it's
but look at how much business you've gotten from that, right?
I mean, it's fantastic
in the food blogger world.
Well, and again, the good thing about the food bloggers is specifically is it's all referral only. So if you do a good job, everyone finds out. Just like if you do a bad job, everyone's going to find out.
So let's go back to food bloggers. I mean, it's one thing to be, let's say you have a vegan website and you have vegan recipes. There are hundreds and hundreds of vegan websites that are out
I will
there,
just let you know that of all the food blogs I've audited, and of course there's been hundreds, number one are vegan.
Yeah. That's probably why I picked that example, right?
It's so very funny. So if you're vegan, then we go the special diet ones, then everything else below that.
Yeah. So number one goal, if you're a vegan blogger, is to write content that truly is better than others. And as a recipe, like as a food blogger, if you've got recipes, think of the user, like think of the sites that you consistently go back to. I know that there's certain sites that if I go to that site, I've made recipes from them before and they're fantastic, right? So it's one thing to have a good experience. But you need to find ways to say like, okay, maybe instead of being known as the all things vegan, there's an aspect of that I could take advantage of.
Exactly. So I mean, and I tell bloggers this all the time, is we need to find what makes you special. We need to find what makes this recipe.
Finish the story about myself and writing for Moz,
Mm-hmm.
I started to see that I was interested in Google penalties, and nobody had
Mm-hmm.
really emerged as, like, at that time, as the expert on penalties. Now, I didn't say to myself, I'm going to be the world leading
Right.
expert.
Right.
I just was like, oh, here's something that I could write about, that I'm learning about, that I could teach people on. So that's something I would urge all of you that are watching this, is to find what parts of your content are people truly engaging with. And if people are mentioning you, the Quality Raters Guidelines actually talk about forum mentions can be a sign of E.A.T. So let's say, everywhere where people are talking. So for me, if people are talking about using the disavow tool, Google's disavow tool, they'll often mention my name in conjunction with using the disavow tool. I've successfully
Hold on there. Hold on there, Marie. We've lost the feed here. So let me go ahead and get our technical people involved here. So before we say anything else,
oh no, that's
looks like the live feed on YouTube is stopped. So let's refresh this.
Okay.
See if that does anything really quick. Yeah, refresh your browsers, everyone. So hopefully you can hear this. Refresh your browsers, and it'll pop up pretty quickly. All right, continue on, Marie. I think we're good.
All right. What were we talking about before we lost the feed? We were having an area of expertise. So that's what I'm trying to say. I don't know how much got cut out there, but if you're a food blogger that you're blogging about the same things that 100 other people are, or 1,000 other people are, one key to getting authority is to say, look, I want to be the expert in this particular area, whether it's bacon recipes or, I think vegan is too broad. So you find an aspect of eating vegan food that you can say, look, a lot of people have questions about this and nobody's emerged to answer those questions. So now that's going to be my focus. And then whenever you get those HARO requests and somebody wants an expert on that particular topic, you can say, look, I've been answering questions on this for 5 years. And that's the key, really, is not to try to cover. See, because in the past, if your content was the same as most other websites, if you had enough money to buy links, that would rank, right? And Google's getting really good.
And links are an incredibly important thing. As an example here, I've audited numerous sites which, in the food blogging niche, that their content, unfortunately, is just not high quality, but they have literally 10, 20, 30,000 linking root domains, mostly because of social followings, or they published a cookbook, or they have other off things. And it has basically acted as a crutch to overcome these weak on-site issues. Now, for those of you on the call, we've got a question here. How can we build the E.A.T of your money or your live clients that don't block? How do we, do we clean up the spammy backlinks on that? Do we focus on brand mentions? What would you say specifically on that? We're going to get into a lot of questions here. I think we've done a good job kind of relating the E.A.T. We could talk about it for hours, but we'll probably get into questions next.
Sure.
Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because imagine, moving away from food bloggers, let's say you're an attorney and you're doing SEO for an attorney's website. It's pretty unlikely. That attorney is going to have a very full day. It's very unlikely you're going to be able to get them to blog once a week on, their topics. That said, if they don't have authoritative mentions, it's going to be hard for them to rank well. So some of it can be building up the brand. And getting them mentioned in the news, brainstorming, like, what could we do? I worked with one attorney that did some stuff around gun control, and he created a petition on his website, spread that to the news. Well, I think the SEO agency created the petition, spread it to the press, and the press was all writing about, look, if you're concerned about this issue, you can sign the petition here, and got links back to their website, right?
Fantastic.
So, if the individuals themselves won't blog, you have to find other ways to get them in the news. And that can be challenging. Again, because in the old days, you could almost completely separate SEO from public relations, where I could say, I'll take the site, and maybe I've never met the owner of the site. I've never met the principal owner of the business. And yet I'm going to build links to the site and improve the technical aspects, and it could rank well. But if you can't get the business owner or the, that important person involved in the content, it's going to be challenging.
Right. Okay, so that's an extremely good point. So we're going to get into some questions here very specifically. First of all, Suzanne Brink had a couple questions. Do you have a tutorial on proper SEO image naming, alt text description, title? Suzanne, we're going to go ahead and just paste some of that information over for you. I've got a couple tutorials here that'll help you. alt tags specifically. Go ahead and read that. And I'm going to go ahead and paste over for those of you, especially who are food bloggers. WP Tasty had a great article on this about how alt food bloggers have for years been using alt tags incorrectly. Go ahead and take a look at that. Suzanne also asked very quickly about recipe plugins. Do I have to convert all my old recipes to meet the latest Google search criteria? If I'm missing a few of the 11 or so key schema variables, how much of a difference will that make in my search rankings? Well, again, when we talk about structured data, the more we can provide that's required or recommended for Google, the better you're going to do, because the more of that structured schema fields we can provide, the better and more of these rich snippets you're going to generate, which can conceivably increase CTR and provide bottom line traffic. So personally, I try to fill out everything I can except for video. And the reason I do that is because when I am in the kitchen, and maybe Marie can talk about this, people do not watch videos. They leap with their fingers through process shots. So if you are on this call and you're thinking, I need to spend all this time putting videos in all my recipes, maybe if it's one of your top recipes, great, but absolutely there's other things that are going to have a bigger bottom line involvement for you. So consider that.
I'd almost consider trying video for a couple of recipes and then monitoring the engagement. I mean, but I think
there's a lot of disinformation. A lot of people believe that video is a ranking factor. It's not. Just because Google owns YouTube, for example, YouTube video is not going to provide any increased value for there. That's going to show up a little bit more in the results. But I got to say, recently, over the last 6 months, Google's done a very good job in providing other video results, Vimeos, other offsite things. So that's pretty good. Couple other questions here. Skylar had a question about mobile pushing sidebars or supplemental content below the main content. Should bloggers start moving relevant sidebar content like the author box into the main content itself? What do you think about that?
Okay, so the Quality Raters Guidelines have a lot of information on distinguishing main content from supplemental content.
Right.
And one of the things that can actually make a site be considered lower quality is if you can't make that distinction. I know that's not exactly answering this question. And we haven't talked about ads, which is something that we probably need to talk about, right? So ads would be supplementary content. If a user can't tell what's an ad and what's actually your main content, that's a sign of low quality. Now, I personally think this is one of the things that's in the Quality Raters Guidelines that Google's not strongly measuring at this point. Chrome is going to be coming out with some, new updates are going to be having more in terms of ad blocking, recognizing what's a grotesque ad, what's a disturbing ad, that type of thing. And that's what's in the Quality Raters Guidelines is, if a site it's so ad heavy that it's annoying to people or it's potentially disturbing to people, that's a sign of low quality. So now the next part of the question was, should I be moving my information like author bios into the main content? I would say yes. I don't have specific information to back that up with, but it makes sense to me that that's very important. We want Google to see that type of E.A.T related information. And I think a lot of the time, if it's in the sidebar, it's sort of treated like boilerplate information that is given less importance. So I would say anything that you think is important, anything that's in the Quality Raters Guidelines that you really want Google to pay attention to, for the most part, should be within the main content of your and easy for people to see. You don't want them to have to, scroll past. Maybe we can talk about recipe sites and the fact that so many of them are just so long when that's not what people want, right?
Right. And that gets a concern, is that there's been this incorrect belief that, for example, word count, not a ranking factor. Google's come out multiple times and said that, but then you get all these bloggers who are like, oh, I need to make this post incredibly long. Because I want to stuff it with ads. So a lot of it is that from their ad companies who are trying to, you need to make this post longer so we can put more ads into it. That's not a user first optimization. There's also no reason, for example, we had a question here about, we be making it's been recommended that we make all of our posts 600 words or longer. Well, if you have enough quality content to say and make it 600 words or longer, fantastic. But what I see a lot is the superfluous or unrelated content that users are stuffing their pages with. If you're writing a recipe post and you have 3 or 4 paragraphs about how your Aunt Martha made this for you when you were 6 years old, and that this brings back memories of your time with your boyfriend Gary on the lake, and that this is why, again, you've passed this recipe down, you're going to be in a world of hurt, because this kind of unrelated superfluous content doesn't connect with users in many
Mhm.
cases and can make it hard for Google to get in and evaluate your actual quality content.
So the Quality Raters Guidelines actually have specific examples for
Hmm.
recipe sites. And
Yeah.
all of you who are watching this who have a recipe site should just open the guidelines and search for recipe. I can't remember how
Yeah.
many times it's in there, but one of the things they talk about is they give an example of a low quality site and all it contains is the recipe and that's it. And they say, you know, this is lacking the helpful information we'd like to see, such as user reviews and comments. And so I would be focusing more on trying to get people themselves to leave reviews. And I know that's hard. I mean, I've made hundreds of recipes from the internet. I think it's pretty rare that I've actually left a comment. But I would be working more on getting users involved in making that the most valuable page of its kind. And I understand why people put, you know, paragraphs and paragraphs of words. I mean, number one, yes, you could make more ad revenue. And number two, you've got to have something to differentiate your recipe from all the others that are online. But I think it's not about word count. So words are good. Like Casey said, if people are legitimately going to read those words, and this is the same thing that happens with e-commerce sites, right? If you have product and category pages, and then people stuff 8 paragraphs of keyword stuffed words in there that no human's ever going to read. That type of thing used to work, but it doesn't really help that much now. So there's a balance between, like, you don't want to just have a naked recipe on there and nothing else. But you also don't want to make the user. I've had sites where I go, oh, I recognize this site. I was on it before, and the recipe kept reloading and stuffing new ads in, and it moved around, you know, where the ad appears and then my recipe drops, and I'll just leave those sites. And probably Google can recognize that users find that annoying. So I don't have the exact
Exactly.
answer, but
Yeah, it's basically 6.7. Section 6.7 of the
there
guidelines.
you
And
go.
again, I've linked down to some examples for you on the call to take a look at. I'm also going to go ahead and provide a link again for the quality rater guidelines for those of you who joined late. But these are very important. It's amazing how many people have not read these. And more than that, it's amazing how many ad companies have not read it. Because one of the things that we always see a lot is, again, stuffing your pages with ads. For those of you on the call, some ad companies do a better job than others, but still, all of them, again, again, their goal is to make you money. Sometimes they go a little overboard. If you've got a lot of ads above the fold, if you've got auto-playing muted video ads that follow the user down the page, those are horrible for user experience. I understand that they can make you money, but in many cases, they will increase the DOM nodes on the page. They will negatively impact user experience. Removing them is always something you want to think about because they're just a very low quality ad unit. And they're specifically, and Marie will back me up here, those are called out in the Google Quality Rater Guidelines. There's a whole section where it specifically says, you know, ads that continue to cover the main content as you scroll down the page and are virtually impossible to close, those should provide a lowest needs met classification for the page in question. So this isn't something that is, when people say there's nothing wrong with these ads, well, there is something wrong with these ads. They're being specifically called out in the Google rating guidelines. And that's under section, 6.4, distracting ads and supplemental content. I'm going to go ahead and paste that over.
Yep. Somebody asked in the chat, what about ads that lazy load? And it really all comes down to the user. So we don't know exactly how Google measures this, but think about, and a great way to look at this is to actually have people that use your website, give them a bit of money to answer a few questions for you, do a survey, and say, hey, my fans, my followers, what could I be doing in my recipes to make them even more valuable to you? And I'll tell you one thing, here's something that I have not seen any recipe bloggers do this. Maybe they do, but I haven't come across it. When I'm reading a recipe and it tells me, I need this much butter, this much salt, this whatever, and then I'm reading the instructions, it says now add the butter and salt and the whatever. I have to go back and scroll up. Maybe this is done for ad clicks. I don't know. I have to go back and scroll up and go, how much butter was it again? So if you can write your recipes, you don't have to do the same as what everybody else does, but write them in a way so that the description says, now add your butter and in brackets 1 tablespoon. That would save me so much time. And if I knew that a certain recipe website always produced recipes in a way that make it easier for me to use them, I'm going to go back to that website time and time again. And that's a sign of high quality, in my opinion. I think it can only help.
Yeah, exactly. So a quick question here: Do the quality raters aren't just looking at sites on mobile? Is that correct? They're doing desktop as well, or is it mostly
Yeah,
mobile
they
related
do
these
both,
days?
but I think that question comes from it's important to know that if a quality rater reviews your site and they find it lacking, they can't penalize your site. Okay. So whether they look at it on mobile or desktop, they're looking for examples that Google's algorithms have got things wrong. And so let's say they go to your site and they're like, oh, there's these horrible ads and this is untrustworthy, and they flag you as potentially having ad issues. Then it's not like your site is going to drop, but the next time the engineers, they might look at this and go, this is a real problem. We're showing too many sites with grotesque ads. And so we'll write an algorithm that affects all of these sites that do that type of thing, if that makes sense. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah, and
that answers the question.
we're gonna get into some more questions here very quickly. So Jennifer Farley said that, yeah, I've had Mediavine, I've had other sites customize their videos so it starts in the sidebar and scrolls down. I get rid of it if it's
Oh,
bad. I just see everyone has them. It's, again, you don't know what you don't know. It's how many
yep.
times have we had an audit where someone is doing something and they've been told to do this by a bigger blogger, or they've been reading something online, or they went into a forum.
Yep.
Again, Marie and I, again, we're not the authority on this. We know more than most, and because we focus specifically on these niches. But here are the Google Quality Rater guidelines directly from Google telling you,
Mhm.
don't do this. Or if you do this, expect to be voted below or voted down.
Yep.
So that's all we can say is, if you just understand that you have control over your ads.
Yep.
If you want to use auto playing video ads, just understand that that might be a hit against you from a UX standpoint. We're
Yep.
going to go ahead and get into some more questions here. Let's see here. You think adding the review rating to the structured data has a big impact on E.A.T?
It's
Well,
hard to say. Yeah.
hard to say. If you can
Yeah.
add reviews, like I said, if you're on a recipe or lifestyle blog, you are using a plugin that has recipe ratings built in. Are there any general guidelines for a blog meant to promote an e-commerce store brand and products? What would you say on that
Oh,
with regards to
okay.
E.A.T?
So the quality raters guidelines talk specifically about product EAT. So if you're selling something that's specific to your company, so for example, again, I know we have a lot of focus on food bloggers because there's a lot of you here, but let's say that you have a particular program. We saw this with a lot of keto sites that saw drops August 1st. And if this particular site had a program to a diet plan, instructions about how to follow the keto diet, that type of thing, then in order for that to do well and for Google to want to rank that, they want to see good reputation for that product. So what we'll do when we do our reviews is we'll do a search for that product and reviews. And so we'll say, brand name, keto course reviews. And we'll see, are people actually talking about this? So if nobody is talking about your products, then they're going to have trouble ranking well. Okay. And then that's the thing, is to get people to talk about your products. And what we see often is e-commerce sites, they're just selling the same products everybody else is selling. And so you have to find ways to differentiate yourselves. And user-generated content is a great way to do that. Guides that people would actually use. So again, think of the people who are reading your pages. If they're trying to decide whether to buy your product or your competitor's product, create a guide that says, look, we've put the pros and cons, and our product's not perfect, but we think it's better because of this, and that type of thing. So the key is in adding value.
Right, right.
Again, I mean, we could say, well, how is Google going to determine that? We could have a whole discussion as to whether or not they look at whether content is engaged with, but we know that it's in the guidelines. And so our goal in everything we do should be making our site better for people to use.
Right. Very good point. Okay, so continuing on here, we had a question on Marley. Casey, you've encouraged optimizing category pages. Some add lots of content to a category page, like a post. Is that okay? No, I would not add a post to a category page. When we optimize a category page, I'm probably recommending just a couple paragraphs of content at the top, specifically related to that category, like, hey, welcome to the cakes category page. You're going to find cakes, this, and this, great for seasonal or entertaining. And then I might have a second paragraph that, by the way, here are direct links to my top cake recipes in this category. But I see people over optimizing category pages all the time. No value in that. Our goal here is that these category pages are windows into our site.
Mhm.
Your goal is to make it easy for users to find your top content, but we're just providing a little bit of introduction at the top. We're not writing a novel, and I see people overdo
Yes.
that all the time. All you're doing is pushing that category content below the fold anyway. Not a big fan of that on mobile
I think it's
specifically.
important to have some content there. I mean, I see a lot
Very
of people
much.
have category pages that are just lists of posts in the
Yeah.
category. And then also think, I really like the idea of adding links to the important pages on your site that connect with that. This might be a place as well to say, other users were interested in these categories. And just, do whatever you can. Again, if SEO didn't matter, what could you do on those pages to actually help the customer? I'm a big fan of creating guides, buying guides, and putting links to those on your category pages as well as your product pages, and as much user generated content. Gary Ish said at one point that if you had to rate things on a scale with like high quality content being worth a 5 in Google's eyes and links, maybe being worth a 4, then comments, user engagement in the form of comments, he said, could be a 1. Now that you could say, well, that's a small ranking factor, but the fact that it's a ranking factor at all is significant, right? So that's the type of thing, even on category pages, if it's appropriate, I would generate, ask questions, put a Q&A on there. Just do all you can to answer every question that the user has.
Right, right. Now, on that note, though, and I want to preface this by saying that, again, personal experience here when we're auditing recipe sites, some of you on the call are right in trying to make your posts as exhaustive as possible. Here are some popular questions and answers users might have when making this recipe. Your goal is not to ask and answer every question on the page. Your goal is to be able to use your demonstrated expertise, your experience, to know which questions and answers are going to be most useful for the user. That might be 2 or 3 questions. That might be, here's the cut of beef you should use. Here's how we know that this ingredient is good. Here's what you do with leftovers. I am seeing a disturbing trend lately with a lot of food bloggers trying to make these incredibly voluminous posts that look like encyclopedic articles on mobile. That's not helping you. Okay, we need to write for the user. A user's not going to be really interested in reading the history of parsnip on your post when they're looking specifically how to make this perfectly and the like. So please give that some consideration. Less is more in many regards. Don't believe for a fact that you need to stuff these pages with a ton of content so that you have more room to include
So
ads.
let's say I had this fantastic new recipe for beef brisket. And what I would do if I was a food blogger and publishing that on my site is look at, do a search for beef brisket recipe or, whatever, if I'm going to use it in my smoker or whatever, whatever I want that to rank for, and look at who's currently ranking and say, can I forget like the quality of the recipe? I mean, obviously that needs to be important, but can I make this page more valuable to people than what already ranks?
Right. And what do we call that? We call that the skyscraper method. So many of you
for
probably
sure.
heard that. What we're doing is understand, though, that Google still has a prominence for linking root domains. It's why a site like All Recipes,
Yes.
which has truly horrible recipes, can still rank at the top of Google for most everything because they have 99,000 linking root domains.
And that's the
So,
E.A.T, right? I mean,
yeah, that's
their E.A.T is so strong that
incredibly strong.
yeah, they can get away with stuff that, and this often happens is that the smaller sites will look and say, well, All Recipes is doing that. Why,
So why can't I do that and realize that
exactly.
it's not apples to apples? So we
And
really
when
have
you
to
have
push
the
back on
authority
that.
that All Recipes have, then you can do that too. So when you're not known as the leading authority, you've got to be constantly finding ways to produce value in order for your content to rank well. And I truly think this is part of the Panda algorithm, where if you have post after post that's essentially the same as what all the other stuff that's out there, that can impact the overall quality of your entire website. So
Very
you
true.
may have the odd post that's like super valuable, but if 90% of your content is the same regurgitation that everybody else is doing, that's going to bring down the quality of your entire site probably.
Yeah, and again, good point on there. Let this be an interlude. Let me just use this as an interlude here. If you're on the call and you're a recipe blogger and you're thinking, okay, well, what should I be publishing? Do a Google alert for food trends. You will be shocked. If you can start thinking about 2019 food trends, you are shocked at how many people, how many articles, how much information is out there. Bloggers are not publishing stuff about there. I didn't even know about this, but I mean, there's like this huge seafood's big this year. Still not seeing a ton of new seafood recipes in 2019, which is interesting. Also, crazy flavors for gelato. Also, rise of things like monk fruit, which is of course big for the keto diet. Maybe you find a way to use that as a sweetener, things like that. But do a search. The National Restaurant Association publishes a report on food trends. They published it in January. Find that, read it. A couple other quick questions here. Let's see here. Mediterranean dish, push notifications. Yes or no to push notifications? I heard they slow down the page, but some swear by them as far as driving traffic to particularly new content.
All right. So my answer to this is, do you like them? I mean,
I don't. I personally hate push notifications.
I
always say never allow. So I would really urge you to not use anecdotal evidence. Please download and install hotjar.com. Hotjar.com is fantastic. It's free to use, up to 20,000 sessions a month. Find and record how users are navigating your site. If you can see that they repeatedly go up and choose never allow, you'll know immediately if it's something that you need to keep on your site. Do not listen to, I've heard this, or I've had other bloggers say this. Your site is different. Okay. I do the same thing when someone comes out and gives a blanket statement like, hey, maybe you should never use recipe or jump or print recipe buttons. It's just terrible advice. You need to go ahead and do something like hotjar.com and see how users are using it. If they're using it, we know that it's fulfilling user intent and it's something we want to keep.
Somebody asked John Mueller about whether that could be a sign of low quality, having the notifications up there. And I think that was his answer too, was, well, do you like them? So I don't think at this point, I don't actually think that that's being factored in, but I think it could be in the future. I think unless they're converting like crazy for you, and what I would like to see is if you are using them, wait till somebody's been on your site either for repeated visits or for a period of time, because I see this all the time. Like, hey, you've been on our site for 2 seconds. Do you want us to send you notifications of everything new that we publish? Well, of course not. Right.
Exactly. Very good point. So let's go ahead. We're going to finish up here. It's about 12 after the hour. I know that we could stay and talk all day, but I know, Marie, I know you're busy. We tried to get to as many questions as we can. Please leave your questions here. They're going to be published on the transcript. There'll also be a page after. You can go ahead and submit questions that way, and maybe Marie and I can find some time to answer that. But in the end, let's go ahead and do kind of a summary here, Marie. What would you say, again, for those who were affected by the core update, for those of you who are looking ahead to 2019, what can they do specifically to increase both their understanding of the guidelines, their demonstrated E.A.T, and recover specifically from maybe a negative impact from the core update?
Sure. So to repeat, the first thing I would say is to actually take the time to read the Quality Raters guidelines. You don't want to print them out and read them, because there are links to images to show exact examples. And those are where the real keys are. And then the next thing I would do is try to objectively look at who's currently ranking for your content. And I find it hard because a lot of people will be like, well, that person's not known as an authority. I'm way more authoritative. And when we do the searches like they're listed in the Quality Raters guidelines, it's pretty clear that the one that's ranking well actually is more authoritative. So if you want more information on E.A.T, I'll put a couple links in the chat to some things that I've written, but I have a thorough document on E.A.T that sort of describes the Quality Raters guidelines and what we look at from that. And I don't know if I can just very quickly plug my newsletter. I have a newsletter as well that almost every episode, as soon as John Mueller or somebody from Google comes out with something that's related to E.A.T, we'll talk about that and we'll unpack it and say, okay, Google sort of hinted that this could be something we should work on. So here's how you could improve your quality that way. And then the one final thing I would say to look at, which we haven't talked about a lot, is link quality. If you have been actively in the past making links just for SEO purposes, you might, I'm pretty sure that that's a part of overall site quality, and you may want to look at using the disavow tool. That is probably a whole topic for another day, but look at link quality as well.
Right. So again, very important with regards to that. I know a lot of bloggers are confused about how we go about link building. one of the things you want to look at is, again, networking with your fellow bloggers. I know roundups are very popular. There are plenty of groups on Facebook that allow you to exchange links, or that allow you to at least put a link or to a related recipe down, so that if someone's interested in doing a roundup, they might consider you. But pull marketing is one of the things that are routinely is one of the best ways for you to build those links into your site. What is it about your site that you can put that other users cannot provide? Is it a how to do keto correctly for 90 days? It is a, foods to avoid on keto. Is it, this is everything you're ever going to know about gluten-free pie? And these are all real resources that I'm talking about here, by the way. So these are things that other bloggers have put on their site, which allows them to pull in links naturally. And of course, networking. If you have the ability to go to conferences, if you have the ability to speak on seminars like Marie and I are doing here, if you have the ability to attend a conference, do a webinar, get interviewed, those are going to lead to brand mentions. Those are going to lead to links. Those are going to reinforce your E.A.T and your authority. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and share. First of all, I'm going to thank you, Marie, for coming here today. I know that, again, in Canada, so you probably have to get on a reindeer and go back out to the house. I know you have to start early. I do definitely want everyone to look up the strategic maple oil, the maple syrup reserve. Fantastic information. I did not know that it exists. It is absolutely true. A barrel of maple syrup is worth 10 times what a barrel of oil is. I did not know that.
Yeah, it's worth more. It's good stuff.
So we're going to go ahead and
paste a barrel of oil.
Exactly. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick moment. We're going to go ahead and push our next webinar, which is going to be in April. I'm going to go ahead and paste over a link for all of you on the call here. It's going to have, and you know her pretty well as well, Marie. You know Ashley Ward. Great person, great speaker. Ashley's great. Ashley and I, we get along well. She's in San Diego County. We're going to be doing, the next strategy session is going to be on work smarter, work harder, work smarter, not harder, how to dominate 2019 with reusable content. Ashley is fantastic with content. We're going to talk about content auditing, what constitutes high quality content, what constitutes low quality content. So take a look at that, register for the webinar. And Marie, thank you so much for your time today. You're a wealth of information.
Oh, thanks, Casey. I really enjoyed this. So anytime.
Good. And we will definitely do something again, hopefully later in the year. So have a fantastic rest of your day. For all of you on the call, thanks so much for enjoying and again, taking time out of your schedule. And we really appreciate it. We'll talk again soon. Thanks so much.